I grew up quiet, too quiet. My dad told me not to cry when I was just a young boy, and I learned to bury my feelings deep. For many years, I carried the silence like a weight. Then, I picked up a guitar, and everything changed. Music became my language, my outlet, my freedom. In this episode, I talk about what it was like to grow up shy, how music gave me my first real voice, and why creating something for yourself can unlock the truth that you've been holding in. If this hits you, stick around, subscribe, like, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. Remember, create more than you consume. I'm Charlie, and this is Create Over Consume. So, first things first today, I want to talk about childhood silence. When I was just 5 years old, my grandfather on my dad's side of the family passed away. And it was hard for the whole family. And I was just five, I didn't know how to take that in because it was first real experience with death, so to speak. My dad told me, he's like, real men don't cry. Like, we don't cry at all. We're just men. That's what we do, kind of thing. And so, I took that into heart because my dad told me, and I didn't cry at all. I didn't really get the poison out, to experience my grandfather's death. And it was really, really hard. I went that way for about a year, in fact. And one day I remember just coming home from school, and I had just gotten into the house, and I ran into the family living room, and I buried my head behind the couch, and I just started bawling my eyes out because I was thinking about my grandpa. So basically, I held the poison in, and I buried it, and then it bubbled up, and it was too much to bear, and I let it all out. My mom came running into the room, and she's like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And I just didn't want to say because I thought real men don't cry. Now, a lot of times I would actually bury my feelings because I guess that's how I kind of went about things, is burying my feelings as I was a kid. And nobody ever told me to go ahead and talk about things to figure out how to process it and stuff like that. So there was this loneliness in being shy, so to speak. And as I said in a prior episode, when I was about 9 or 10, I was sick for about a year in school. And so it was my formative years, and all my friends paired up into cliques and groups and stuff like that. And when I finally got back to school after having pneumonia for about a year, it was really lonely because I felt like an outcast or outsider and stuff. I felt invisible to all this. And I'd go on for that for so long until I realized that I had the chameleon power that I talked about in last episode. Now, I had this moment, I'm going to call it the guitar moment. This is the first time I played and felt alive, kind of thing. My grandparents had an apartment in the upstairs of their home for many, many years, and they had tenants. The first tenants was friends of my grandmother's because my grandmother had worked with a man named Jack, and they had worked together at a telephone company, and Jack and his wife ended up moving into the upstairs apartment, and they stayed there for many years, and it was a good thing for my grandparents to make some extra money for the home and to go ahead and also have them have a solid place to live and stuff, I guess. Jack had given me a Yamaha classical acoustic guitar. I don't know why. I guess he was just cleaning out his house and didn't want the guitar anymore. And he's like, "Hey, Charlie might want it." Told my grandmother. My grandmother got me talked into a lot of different deals, and it was kind of cool because I got into things I never dreamed of or imagined, I guess. But I would mess around on that guitar, and I remember feeling like, hey, there was something coming out of me that I was expressing no matter what I was playing on that guitar. I ended up tuning that guitar way too tight because I knew nothing about guitar at that time, and that guitar was short-lived, I guess, because the bridge came off. The bridge snapped, and it completely came off. I never knew to repair it, so I guess my parents threw it out, threw it in the burn barrel, something like that. It became firewood, sadly. But then, I guess maybe 3 or 4 years later, when I was about maybe in 15, 16, somewhere in there, 14 even. I came back to this idea of guitar because around the same time at age 9 or 10, my dad had turned me on to music. I was getting into stuff like Aerosmith, AC/DC, Guns N' Roses, things like that. It was about the early 90s, I guess you could say. The Aerosmith Pump album had come out in about 89 or so, and I was all into that with my dad. And so I was like, hey man, I want to be a rock star. And so I want to play guitar. Well, I don't remember the exact year, but I remember that there was a J.C. Penney's catalog and that there was a Harmony H804. It was all black. And I wanted that guitar more than anything. I begged my parents, I begged my grandparents, I begged everybody to get me that guitar for Christmas. Everybody pooled their money together, and eventually I got that guitar with a little 10-watt Harmony practice amp as well. I played that guitar till my fingers bled because literally when you start a guitar or start to play guitar, your fingers are going to toughen up. You're going to get calluses and stuff on your fingers and your playing hand and your fret hand at least. And so I put myself into that guitar. There's many times I would go to my room, I'd just turn on that guitar and I'd get out the Poison. I didn't know at the time that that was what I was doing. I was using the guitar to express everything I'd buried inside of me. But I knew, for one damn thing for sure, I felt alive. Many years later, I would find music as my language when I was about 18. As I mentioned, my grandmother had passed and my parents had separated, and my ex-girlfriend had told me she didn't want a relationship anymore. And I remember I was at a lowest low because I felt nobody was on my side. I felt nobody was there to help me, kind of thing. As I was confused about transitioning into the world because I was working my first job. I really didn't have any direction other than, hey, get a 40-hour-a-week job and go make bills and all that kind of stuff, you know? So when I was at my lowest low, I'd end up driving off. I told everybody some stupid shit that I was going to leave and I was never coming back and whatever. But my ex-girlfriend's mother actually ended up calling the cops because she was really concerned for me. And they found me and they brought me back home. Now, around that time too, before my grandmother had passed, she allowed me to go ahead and use some money she had set aside in a CD for me. She set aside a separate CD for my brother, and she set aside a separate CD for my cousin, because that was who my grandmother was. She tried to always help family out and stuff. But she allowed me to use the money in my CD that would come of age when I was about 17 or so. It was like the year before she died, to get my first real guitar. It was a Jackson PS2 Performer. It was like, this would have been the late 90s technically, so it was about 97 or so. It was all flame red, and it looked incredible. I was all into like rock and metal stuff, and so that's what it was about. Around the same time when I got that guitar, I put aside some of the money I was making working at the printing factory to take some guitar lessons. I went to good old Herb David, which Herb David, if you never heard of Herb David before, Herb David is a guitar shop in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Really well known with some really well known musicians and stuff like that. And Herb David repaired guitars, made guitars. He ended up being a really good guy in my path as well, even though I didn't really get to talk to him as much as I'd like to while he was still alive. But I would take guitar lessons there for about a couple years, and I paid for guitar lessons out of my lawn mowing money or print shop money or however I could make some money. I'd drive downtown Ann Arbor and take lessons from a guy named Sean. Sean played in this band called Deep Space Six, was kind of like psychedelic, and Sean knew a lot about rock and blues and things like that. He was kind of like a hippie dude, really good guy. And Sean taught me anything I wanted to know on guitar. He tried to bring me back to theory, and he tried to bring me back to scales and things like that, the best that he could, but I was stubborn. I've always had a stubborn streak, and I wanted to learn what I wanted to learn, so I'd bring him like these rock songs or punk songs or whatever I wanted to learn, basically, and I'd say, hey, Sean, teach me this. And he'd teach me how to play the basics, like chords so I could strum along and stuff like that. And I knew, again, that I'd felt alive. I'd found a language that I couldn't describe yet, but I felt alive. I'd end up writing songs, and I'd end up getting into my first band with my friends Rick and Mike, and we played in my dad's garage when I was about 18, 19, somewhere around there. We formed this little thing called Distorted Moon, which we never really went too far until we actually signed I call it a faux record label deal because we got into it with Lava Records, which was basically a subsidiary of Atlantic. And they signed us to a development deal, and we got shelved for a little band called Matchbox 20. That's my 15 minutes of fame, so to speak, if you will. And basically the band never got into anything, and we just wrote songs. We played our hearts out in my dad's garage, all that kind of stuff. It wouldn't be until I got into other bands and stuff that I found music was more of a language because I could express what was in my soul, what was in my head, what was in my heart kind of thing. And it just let me process so much shit is what I could tell you. And so when I was processing all this, like after my grandmother passed, I met my ex-wife because I put my time into music. I put my time into finding someone that believed in me 110% because my family was going through some shit at the time. And I met her online, and I ended up going to Washington to meet her, and I literally met her as I stepped off of a plane for the first time in person. We had chatted online for probably 6 months to a year, and then I went to Washington. I found her, and we ended up getting together, and she came back to Michigan with me and moved literally a week later. That's a funny story about things, is sometimes life just happens. I wrote a ton of songs in the time that I knew her as well through all of our marriage and my first marriage. And music had always been this outlet that allowed me to process my joy, my pain, any fucked up things, any good things, anything along my path, basically. And I think it's important to have some form of expression in life because if you don't, then just like when I was a kid, when I was 5 years old and I was told, don't cry, that bubbles up inside of you and you just don't get anywhere with it until it explodes. So that's why expression matters. Expression matters more than anybody can ever imagine. I've done the same thing with photography also because my grandmother also gave me a camera at age 10. And my formative years were in creativity versus just learning how to actually socially be in the world, so to speak. So I'd go on to do the music with the guitar. I'd go on to go with the camera and stuff. And throughout the years, this is how I figured out how to say stuff when I couldn't actually say stuff. Now, there's a lot of ways that we could process this. I could get into the psychological side of this. I could get into the artistic side and many things. But for me, it's getting the poison out. Even when I'd go to New York and I'd end up in New York City working for places like Condé Nast and I'd work for Live Nation and things like that, I used to take these long walks along the river with the camera, or like I'd write music or I'd play guitar or something like that. And I'd process all the things that happened in the day because I was working some really long days. I think everybody needs that balance, really, to be honest. That balance is crucial. That expression is crucial. It's your voice to be heard when you can't be heard, basically. Now, if you've ever felt voiceless, you can find your own language through creating. It doesn't even matter if you're doing it with a guitar or a camera like me. You can do this through different forms of art. You can do this through writing. You could do this through creating a business. There's so many different ways that you could do this. But finding your way to get the poison out, to express yourself, to get that out of your system, and to understand the world, I think is what it's all about. Now, we'll get into many different things coming up in further future episodes, but today I want to leave you with this thought. Turning silence into sound, turning pain into creation. That's what it's been like for me. And I understand that now. It's taken me many, many years to fully comprehend this. And to also be honest with myself, because I had to drag the shadows out and I had to understand what that is and accept that in some degree through healing process through either music or photography for me. It's not like this for everybody. If you can relate, that's cool. If you can't relate, some people just do things different. That's okay too, you know? But as you get into this, I just want to say it's okay to feel. That's like a big thing that I want to tell everybody today. If you ever felt quiet or invisible like I did, I want you to subscribe to this channel. Not for me, but as a reminder to yourself to keep creating. Hit the like button on this video if you ever picked up a guitar, pen, camera, or anything just to say what words couldn't as well. Turn on the notifications on these videos if you want a reminder once a week to stop scrolling and to make something real as well. There's so many people that consume things in this world, but I think that using our time better to create and to actually discover ourselves is what it's about. So, thanks for being here today. My name is Charlie, and this is Create or Consume. I'll see you on the next episode, and have a great day.